What's up, Denver? Today, we got a great episode where we're doing a deal analysis on a brand new build townhome in Arvada. We're going to run through some scenarios on there and talk about a really cool lending program that we used as well. So my co-host and also agent on the deal is Lauren Valinotti. Lauren, glad to have you back in the studio.
Likewise, super excited.
Yeah, so this is part of our series we're going to jump into and talk about deal analyses on new builds. They're also becoming, more and more deals that we buy, especially for house hackers. But Lauren, from like a high-level overview, like from your perspective, and you see deals 7 days a week, what did you like about this property? Like, what stood out to you?
This one was exciting. We got to be able to use some creative financing on it. It was a brand new build townhome. And then there's multiple different plays of how we can make this property work. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into that later.
Yeah. And so our guest and also investor in this property is Anthony Musco. So we got connected, I think, about a year ago. We were trying to remember before that. But his background is he's a software engineer, works in robotics, and is just a wizard at numbers and spreadsheets, which you'll get to see a sneak peek at the end of a really cool spreadsheet that he built. But he's very numbers oriented and just wanted to figure out the best way to start investing in real estate. He moved here from New York City, and obviously prices are a little bit more different out here, and it's a different market. So we came up with a strategy, analyzed a bunch of properties, and then got this great new build. So Anthony, glad to have you on the show, man.
Hey. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Of course. So I know this was from the first couple conversations we had as we were talking, deals and numbers and strategies. New builds was not on the radar
when
we
not
started
at all.
talking. At what point in your journey of setting goals and analyzing properties when you were like, oh, new builds, they may make sense? Like, when did that pop for you?
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise to me. I definitely didn't start out looking, for new builds and luxury townhomes. I think it was definitely just a product of the current market that we're in. I started off looking at small multifamily, duplexes, triplexes. I must have run the numbers on maybe a dozen different properties of that type.
'Cause I think you started doing that that was summer last year when you started.
Yeah, it was around
crunching numbers.
Like August, I think.
Okay.
And I've just been keeping my eye on the market for a long time. I was targeting, an acquisition around the new year, so January, February.
That's when your lease ran out?
Right, yeah. And like I said, I ran the numbers on maybe a dozen properties, and the original plan was to do something maybe more modest, maybe a distressed property, get something with a bit of a discount, fix it up, rent it out, that kind of thing. Two big wrenches in that plan. One, we're in like a historic seller's market. You don't really find those deals very easily unless you're devoting a ton of time to it. And the second is that even, finding those deals, they're pretty expensive to begin with, and they also require a lot of, work just to get it up to, rental quality. So I figure, if I'm going to buy something, I might as well buy something where all of the work has already been done. I get to finance the costs of all of those updates, so to speak, where a new build would just be brand new, and see where we go with there. It's more desirable from a tenant perspective, and I don't really have much to worry about as far as long-term maintenance.
And since a big part of as you're analyzing the market, getting to fit into your strategy, it became more and more clear that, hey, this is a great long-term leverage play.
Yeah.
And whether you buy a fixer-upper that everyone's trying to find out there, or a new build, the cash flow numbers aren't that much difference, but the leverage is where you're getting this, a lot of times a significant return on there.
Correct. Yeah. You said it before that the goal is always the next deal, right? Why would I spend $1, fixing up a property that I acquired where I could use that dollar to acquire a new one, as long as, cash flow is equal, right? So, I kind of moved away from, buying something where you put, maybe 10, 15K into it to get it up to speed, rather than just buy something where it was either just recently renovated or it's a new build and you get to finance all that, all other things being equal.
Great. All right. So as I mentioned in the previous podcast, we're going to spice things up on the way we're doing the deal analyses. So we're going to actually plug in the numbers live to a spreadsheet. So we're going to talk about them from the podcast. If you're on YouTube or want to watch YouTube, go here. You'll see us in real time, fill it out. And what we're going to do is we're just going to start plugging the numbers and use numbers, kind of tell the story about how you found the property, how you acquired it, and all that stuff. So starting off, it's a new build townhome not far from Olde Towne Arvada, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And that was part of, like, from location standpoint, Lauren, I mean, what's attractive about that from just the overall, big picture map of Denver Metro? What's so attractive about Olde Towne?
It's still pretty central to town, which is great. The light rail runs all the way through it, so you can literally, from the airport, take the light rail all the way there. The downtown has a lot of charm. There's maybe like a 4-block radius of local restaurants and bars, places that even people that live closer to the city are attracted to these bars out in that area. So it's a walkable, location also. And then we'll kind of touch on too, it is in a opportunity zone as well.
That was a big component to this deal.
Because that will, I think, feed into financing here. So
correct.
Put the, just Arvada up here. I mean, it's a 1-unit primary residence. Now, down payment. Talk more about the opportunity zone. Who wants to take that hot potato and what that led to?
Well, the opportunity zone necessarily for this one, how it benefit Anthony was that we were able to use the Bank of America grant program. And it's a 2-step grant program. It's the $10,000 grant, which is what you can use towards your down payment. And then it's $7,500 that you can use towards your closing cost. How you can get approved for this is that you have to make less than $150 a year, and you have to have a pretty good credit score. Location is another factor here for the secondary grant, and it's kind of dictated based upon what your income is. So however much money you make is going to dictate to where the property will qualify for that one. And so this property was in an area that allowed Anthony to be able to use both of those grant programs for a total of $17,500 of money he'll never have to pay back, which was pretty amazing.
Helps with the numbers and keeps more cash in the pocket. And because a lot of times, I just want to clarify, we talk about opportunity zones a lot of times from like the investor standpoint, their 1031 tax-like advantages. But that's not something that Anthony is taking advantage of. It was just that, hey, Bank of America, through whatever government program it is, they got funding and they could direct it into this areas, and we can kind of ride those waves, those areas, and it works out very well. So for down payment, what should we put down here? This is where we're going to have to kind of like finagle the spreadsheet a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the loan itself was 5% down.
Okay.
But that doesn't include the $10,000 down payment grant. Or the $7,500 closing cost credit.
So just 5% off the price. And then what about mortgage insurance? Was that monthly paid, prepaid? What'd you do?
Oh, so there was no PMI required for this loan, which was another killer part of the financing.
That's a big fat cherry on top, huh?
Yeah, and wait until you see the rate along with no property mortgage insurance.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select upfront single paid on the spreadsheet, and then we'll wash it out in a minute as we get a little farther down here. Purchase price. Kind of what was the ballpark there?
$559,000.
$559,000. And then we have a field for acquisition cost, which is typically appraisal, inspection, all those little costs there, and about $1,540 for loan cost. What would you say your acquisition costs were?
So the acquisition cost total on paper, not including the closing cost credit or the grant, was about $13,000.
And that in loan cost in there about $1,450 altogether. Is that close, or do we need to wash that out?
Yeah, that's close enough for the spreadsheet. Keep in mind this also includes, one of the wrinkles in the deal was due to COVID, that the builder wasn't able to finish the property by the closing date or the target closing date, so I had to keep extending the rate lock, which was a bit of a pain, but that's pretty much why those acquisition costs were higher than
Well, it was a pain, but it cost you money. Like if you say, hey, we got this rate locked in until December 31st, and the builders can't deliver for another 2 weeks, push it back to January 15th, the lender says, hey, that's going to cost you another eighth of a point, quarter of a point. I mean, that cost you a couple $100 to a couple $1,000. Like, there's pain there.
Yeah, that's the pain there. But
and that's one of the risks with new builds is they don't always get built on time.
especially during a global pandemic.
And I'm looking here going down. We've got the B27, and it shows the upfront mortgage insurance about $8,500. So in the seller credits, I'm just going to wash out and put in $8,500 there to wash that out.
Mm-hmm.
But then also from Bank of America, you got basically $17,500 total.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
On this one, though, unfortunately we cannot put that into the seller credit because the way that Joe has it written, it's a cap normally of 3%. So I would just put that $8,500 in there, and then on the initial repair cost, let's do a negative $17,500. And then he did have to include a $2,000 repair cost to buy the washer dryer. So you can just do negative $17,000 plus $2,000.
Yep. So 15.5.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So that number looks about right of that initial cash investment.
Yep.
Awesome.
It's, just south of $27,000.
Yeah.
So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So that means all in between earnest money and the final, wire you're bringing to the closing table, all in for just under $27,000 on a $559,000 place, which is great. So, great leverage. Interest rate, we got it pre-populated at 4.5%. I know it wasn't that high.
It was 2.75%, 30-year fixed.
This is what makes nomading and house hacking
not that high.
So good. 2.25%. There we go. So 2.75 at 30 years. Now, how do you want to analyze? I think we're going to analyze this as once you move out, right? As a first pass through. We kind of talked about a few scenarios we're going to play with on here. Because what we always like to do is say, hey, cool, we always like to analyze it first as a future rental property. Because this is not your dream home. It's not your forever home. It's a future rental property that you're buying here. When you move out, what do numbers look like? So we like that perspective. And we also like to be on the more conservative spectrum and then come back and kind of play some of the numbers as well. So in a year or two when you move out, actually, when do you think you'll move out?
So we're targeting a year from now. But depending on how, so this actually, I guess it's a good point to touch on the flexibility of the property. And that was another driving or motivating factor for acquiring the new build. So it's a 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath. Each bedroom has its own private bath, and obviously it's a brand new build, 2020 construction. It's got very modern finishes. It's a very functional property. So one of the other nice things about it was that it works in so many different ways. It can work as a pure Airbnb, and that also goes back to what the city of Arvada is allowing non-owner occupant Airbnbs. It can also work as a rent by the room because each room has its own private bathroom, and the common areas are pretty nice. And then it also works as a single tenant, a single one tenant annual lease. So I bought it with that flexibility in mind.
Which is great optionality.
Yes, flexibility is always great. Haven't really decided where we're going to stick with. The plan right now is to Airbnb out one of the 2 bedrooms while we're living there for a year.
Okay.
So we're targeting 1 year. So January, February of 2022 is when we will be, looking for our next deal and planning to move out to our next house hack. And then once that happens, we're probably going to turn the entire thing into an Airbnb and see how long we're going to, be okay with that level of management. Because the way I'm thinking about it is the Airbnb, rent by room, and then single tenant are decreasing in both management requirements and also income potential. So Airbnb, heavy management, if I'm, checking in every week, making sure tenants are scheduling or guests are scheduling. But the highest income potential, rent by the room, slightly less income potential, slightly less management, and then finally, the standard landlord model.
And you did a great job explaining because it's a balance. Hey, we can maximize the revenue, but it's going to take more time, and just comes down, hey, how much time and mental bandwidth do you want to put into there?
Exactly.
And usually every year I want to put a little less and less time into there.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing too, we should talk about this. We started doing some work with a really good Airbnb property management company.
Lauren
we'll get you hooked up to them. I will send you an email. They've been a great resource the last couple of weeks. We're doing some more details in the future, but they'd be great people pick their brain on. And also some numbers they showed us, like their management fees. it can make sense to hire them as a manager as well and still get some better cash flow.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'd love to get in touch with them and see what they have to say.
So looking at here from when you move out in a year time frame, doing a conservative single tenant scenario, what do you think the rent will be?
I have it at $2,700 a month.
Lauren, any comments on there?
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see where it lands. It's a high desirable area. It's walkable, to Old Town. With the fact of where inventory is so low, people are really not able to get into their own house, so they're kind of getting forced into renting. So there is a theory that rents kind of might start ticking up a little bit, but I think this is on the lower end side.
All right. Vacancy, you guys go if you're on at 5%, be conservative?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Rent increase, we'll say 3%. Annual appreciation, we'll say 3%. Taxes, we'll just leave at 25%. Property management, do you plan on self-managing or hiring a PM?
I plan on self-managing. And again, this goes back to, the level of, time invested versus income. If it gets to the point where, it's becoming too much of a hassle and I'd rather just hire a property manager, then I'll go for that. But in the beginning, this is what I'm going to expect to do.
Great. And so here's something I always kind of debate on for, monthly reserves, because this is a brand new build. You probably have a builder's warranty for 1 year.
Yes.
And so, hopefully the first 5-7 years you should have, knocking on wood here, really no major maintenance items, no CapEx items. So I debate sometimes around 8% for long-term averages. I'm like, hey, it's a brand new property. We're not lower the first couple years. How did you analyze it? Did you run lower or?
I ran super low, mostly because, we didn't really talk about my investment horizon or what I'm expecting to do. I have a 7-year investment horizon. So, in 7 years, I'm going to either sell or cash out refi and then just make a decision there. But for those 7 years, I don't expect any huge maintenance expenses. I mean, obviously anything could happen, but I'm maintaining a pretty decent cash reserve for PITI. So my perspective is, as far, don't put too much into reserves. And then if, anything happens, just go into my my cash reserves. Or I should say, don't use monthly reserves. Use whatever I have as my cash reserves.
Okay. So run this at 5% on rents, or what'd you?
I put it at like 1%.
Okay, we'll put it at 1%. And I'm glad you mentioned kind of like the plan, because I want to plug in the spreadsheet model you built later, because you built a really cool model for the 7-year time horizon.
Yeah.
So we'll go into a lot more details in that in the next 10 minutes or whatever as we wrap this up. HOA fees. What are they?
$190.
And what's that include?
So that includes water, sewer, landscaping, trash removal, and
like full
Snow.
landscaping
and snow. Yeah,
there's water, sewer, landscaping, snow removal, and trash, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's it's a townhouse. So there's really I own no grass. It's all just common. We have a common park right in front of the community.
And I want to make a note on here for the rents. What's the so 27 is low end. What do you think like the high end is, Lauren or Anthony?
For a single tenant?
Yeah, for this in the future in a year or two, because I know if rents go up, like what's the range of conservative to a little more if everything goes right?
I think you could get like $3,000 a month.
Okay. So I'm just gonna make notes in here for future reference, and then we can come back in a year and.
Yeah, as a baseline, I was just using pretty easy numbers.
Absolutely.
2,700 for a single tenant, 3,000 for rent by the room would be like $1,000 a month per room, which I thought was reasonable. And then and I had 3,600 for an Airbnb.
Okay.
On average.
Taxes. Now this is always can be a slightly tricky year one or first year and year one of new build townhomes.
Yeah, my taxes are super low because it's assessed as vacant land right now. I have it as $3,900 annually.
Because right now it's probably what, $900, $1,000,
something like that. To be honest, I don't know what the actual tax obligation is because it's just, it's kind of irrelevant. Should be assessed sometime this summer, and then I'll have my tax bill. So this is really probably the biggest uncertainty I have right now is what the tax bill is going to be.
But you said $3,900.
Yeah, and I think that works out to like $325 a month.
Yeah, I mean, from a lot of price point, new builds location, that's within the range we often see and calculate ourselves. Insurance. What was your insurance like? Your property insurance?
It's so it was $1,060. and then I was able to bundle it with my auto insurance. So it dropped below 1,000. So I think it's like $960 right now.
Cool. And I would definitely just recommend few and other house hackers when you move out. Make sure you update your insurance policies.
Yes.
Because a lot of times when you go from owner occupied to landlord policy, your rates actually drop because they're no longer insuring your personal property. Utilities, probably zeros, I'd imagine, right?
So water and sewer 0, trash is 0, electric
Will be tenant paid, right?
yes.
At least if you're doing the single
Unless,
tenant.
yeah, right, which is what makes modeling this as 3 different scenarios a bit more tricky, but so zero, so no utilities or expenses.
And beyond that, I mean, there's probably another operating cost, right?
Nothing that I have. Management that's modeled separately, and then I usually have like $25 a month for minor repairs, but
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's that, $250 a year? Yeah. So why do you do that versus keeping this lower?
Yeah, that's a good question. In my perspective, like, minor repairs would just be, like replacing light bulbs and you just general wear and tear, whereas, maintenance reserves are, I got to replace the water heater,
Okay.
like that kind of capital expense. I guess it's just, apples,
Yeah. That's all just the way you classify it. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, that's just the way I like to think about it. Cash flow versus capital expenditures.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. All right, so we're going to switch over from the inputs tab to the cash flow tab here. Zoom in some, so this restates everything. So we have a total expected annual rental income of about just under $31,000 after we subtract out the 5% vacancy. All your annual expenses, except for not including mortgage, is going to be about $7,700 a year, which gives you an NOI of $23,000 a year, less your mortgage payments of $26,000 a year, which comes up with an annual cash flow of negative $3,000. Whew. So you can't return it now.
Yeah.
But talk to us about this, because this is something we talked a lot about, just in terms of your, and I think it might be a good time to talk about your longer term goals with real estate investing and how you just came up, hey, cool, this is the most efficient use of capital, and I'm fine with this type of number. Kind of walk us through your reaction, your thought process to why you're fine with negative $250 a month in cash flow.
Obviously I would love to have positive cash flow on this. But my perspective was, this is the most conservative scenario, right? So this is a single tenant. I'm planning on running it as an Airbnb, so the cash flow should be slightly positive in reality. But under a conservative assumption, this, is my worst case, which I'm totally happy with, because this is predominantly a leverage play.
Yeah.
So, as you see at the top, I was able to buy, a $560,000 property for under $30,000, cash up front. I just think it's a great use of leverage and a great opportunity, because my return isn't really going to be in the cash flow. It's going to be in the debt pay down and the appreciation.
And let's talk about these numbers, because when you look at this, I mean, this is where you can say, hey, this is a potentially a triple-digit return on your money the first year of owning it, because appreciation, a 62% return. Again, doesn't mean you made 62% appreciation, but saying, hey, the property appreciated $16,000 and change, divided over your down payment of $26,000 and change, gives you a 62% return. Your debt pay down, again, same thing. How much debt are you? And as we project out, this is your future tenants, paying down your debt. They're paying down 42%, because, hey, great, you're getting $11,000 a year in debt pay down over a $26,000 down payment. And then tax benefits, and really debt pay down, tax benefits, that comes more into play when you move out typically. But depreciation, tax benefits, 16% a year. Cash flow, negative 11% a year. But altogether, it's a great overall return. Now, I know you're very savvy with your numbers and your planning, Anthony. How are you taking the, because this is a calculated risk reward ratio, of it's a leverage play, and you're making money just on the financing side here. What are you doing to offset the risk of a negative cash flowing asset in a worst case conservative method?
So I'm just maintaining a pretty decent cash reserves. So I'm maintaining 8 months PITI. So if we ever get into that situation where it's negatively cash flowing, and I will have time to be able to make a decision. So that's my my buffer. But as far as the negative cash flow, my perspective is, if it's negatively cash flowing like this for 7 years, that's 3,000 by 7 years. That's $21,000. I mean, I only put down $26,000. So my total investment would be $40,000, which is what I would have put down on another property anyway. So so when I think about it that way, I don't really consider it that terrible. My perspective is just trying to keep the cash flow neutral or positive.
Yeah.
And then just let the asset perform and get the debt pay down, the appreciation benefits.
So I like how you thought about that over the negative cash flow over that time horizon. Now let's go back. I'm going back to the initial tab, and let's add another $21,000 in down payment. So I'm going to take away the initial repair cost of negative 15.5. And I'll just get rid of the seller credits or bump that down a little bit. So that should get us close enough for, hey, putting down another $21,000.
Right.
Get your total initial investment close to $50,000. So now you're putting down, $50,000. And actually, I guess I should probably have done the down
that would have
payment.
been
Yeah,
like
that would have been better,
payment.
huh? All right.
Because you want to get the cash flow to come up.
That's
back
what
to
I was
zero.
playing with. So that's what I get for. So what's your guess? 8%?
So 5% was like 24. So another 10 would be, 2.5. So 8. Yeah.
All right. So that gets the down payment up 5%.
I'm curious. I doubt it's going to actually affect the the cash flow that much.
You gonna take any bets?
I say it drops or raises the negative cash flow by $150.
So you'll $150 a month. You'll be less than $150 a month, or is that annual?
Oh yeah, you're right. So $150 a month. So that would be times 12 would be like $1,500.
So I'm gonna set you up for failure with this question. I'm gonna ask you this now. And you have to follow up with this wizard.
The math.
Well,
quiz.
What's your bet on this?
Well, logically, what he just said, it makes sense. So I'm just gonna
go
suit.
play the Price is Right and go $1 over.
Yeah, exactly.
So I say it's negative 1,300 annually.
Okay. I think you're going to be really close.
We'll see.
But I think it's going to be negative. That's the whole point when we run this
Yeah.
So you're going to do here.
No.
Ooh.
It's 21.
You won, Lauren. Going that $1 over. So negative cash flow is $2,100 a year, as opposed to, I think we're at $3,000 a year. So we saw a $900 difference in swings. Let's say $100 a month. Do you care about $100 a month in the grand scheme of things?
No, not really.
You, Lauren?
No.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
And so looking at the return quadrant, great. $100 more in cash flow. Cash flow is a negative 5% return, but now your overall return is 69%. And it's what you've mentioned a few times. It's because you now have less leverage since you put more down, and that totally changes the return. So while you're making a few more dollars in return, you're actually getting a lower return on your capital investment.
Correct, yeah.
Which is a really great way to look at this and exercise. Like the way I like how you project out 7 years. But say, hey, cool, you can put more down and make a cash flow, but is that worth it? And that comes down to personal risk tolerance. I'm fine with slightly negative cash flow in these high leverage situations because that's where you're winning.
Yeah, as long as you recognize it for what it is.
Yes.
I'm in a position in my investment journey where I'm comfortable assuming a bit more risk. I don't have a whole lot of debt, and in a worst case scenario, I'll it's fine. But the ultimate goal is to get passive cash flow. So my perspective is maintain this high leverage position for 7 years, and then roll that into a more traditional cash flowing property like a smaller multifamily or whatever it may be in 7 years.
So let's pause there and switch over to your spreadsheet because you've got some cool modeling on there, which I think can lead up to like your long-term goals. The last thing I'll say about the high leverage is that you're doing it right, and we always recommend is you're liquid. Mm-hmm. You have cash reserves in the bank, that helps mitigate the risk on there. So before we switch to the spreadsheet, kind of as we wrap up this just deal analysis and we kind of get to have some more geeking out, Lauren, what else are we going to talk about in terms of putting the deal together, things you liked?
Yeah. One thing to kind of touch on that we haven't talked about is on a brand new builds, there's appreciation right off the bat. you were the first phase of this development. And as second phase is already, going on to the market, the same exact layout is already going for, I think, like 25,000 more, up to like 30. And really with the way that
already. Because you closed in January, right?
January
21st, yeah.
Right. So there's a really good chance that this same model might actually go for 600,000, really. And so that's also an interesting play for a newer build that some of our investors do. They'll go in day number one. They're the very first lot. And by the end of the completion of that development, they're already appreciated so much just for the timing there.
You just have to be okay with living in an active construction site for
Yeah, absolutely.
But hopefully you're getting compensated for it. I mean, that's the plus, One of the things that I know we talked about, this is we're trying to start educating people on the difference between new builds and resale inventory, Lauren. And I see a note in here about the non-refundable $10,000 builder's deposit, but you're able to negotiate a 2-week refundable period, Lauren. Talk about the setup and what you guys negotiated there.
Yeah. Again, every builder's different. When you start working with the larger nationwide builders, the flexibility on the negotiations is a little bit more difficult. Luckily, this is a local builder. It's a family-run shop as well, so they have a little bit more heart on the back end. Was able to educate them about this grant program and just help them understand like their hesitation, because we still needed to get him pre-approved because it was really that sort of financing that was going to make this deal make sense for him or not. And so we were able to kind of work them down to a lower deposit and allow us this grace period of 2 weeks to be able to get pushed through with Bank of America to get that pre-approval. So we all felt good about it, which was great.
That's smart.
Yeah. And just for the context, traditionally when you go under contract, you have to put down your earnest money, but for the most part, that's refundable for various stages up until closing. But this required earnest money plus the builder's deposit, which is non-refundable. So because I didn't have that financing locked in, that was risk on the table for me, because then I'd be able to, I wouldn't be able to pull that out and move into another investment.
Great. All right, so we're gonna switch gears here. We're gonna have some fun going to Anthony's. It's just a very robust model. I remember we were talking, and you sent over a deal now, so I was like, "Whoa, what is this thing?" It is very impressive. So I'm gonna flip over here, go to full screen. I'm gonna be Van and White for you.
Sure.
Where should we start?
So this summary page is kind of just a very high level. It has some, maybe some esoteric metrics that people may not be too familiar with, but I find it very useful. So here you see three lines. One is the cash on cash, which is the green line, and you can note that it in year one, and the x-axis is years. Right, so I have a 7-year horizon. So in year 7, I either sell or refinance. Here I'm modeling a sale. So the green line, you try and keep it as close to positive as possible.
Yeah.
That's what we're all here for. But what's interesting is the blue and the yellow lines. So
I'm going to interrupt you here. So this is plotted over a 7-year hold. So the green line starts negative. Year 4-ish, it's right around year 4 to 5, it's break even, goes slightly positive. Why does it dip back down in year 6 to negative cash flow? I can't think of why that's doing that.
Right. So I'm actually modeling how long I'm expecting to manage it myself. So I'm planning 5 years. By that time, hopefully I'll have many properties, and I just don't want to manage this directly.
Okay. So that's the property management fee in there that's dropping it. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, back to the other lines.
Yeah, sure. So the blue line is the internal rate of return, which is, when you go back to your spreadsheet and you have like the 66% return in the first year, it basically allows you to equate it to a more traditional investment like, buying stock.
Yep.
it's a bit different because it's not liquid. A lot of your return is tied up in equity from appreciation, debt pay down, but ultimately you're earning money. It's just tied up in the asset. So what the eternal rate of return does, it says, all right, well, let's say in year 4, that's about 30%. That means that you've earned 30% on your money every year for 4 years, which is, if you compare that to the S&P, this year I think it was a 16% return. So, it's a pretty great performing asset, and that's a direct result of the leverage in this asset.
What's your discount rate you're using for this?
So this is just the asset by itself.
Okay.
So I'm computing the discounted the cash flows over time.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's no discount rate. It's just what the actual return is.
Great.
And then the yellow line is the return on equity. So in the beginning, it's incredibly high because I don't have a lot of equity. But as your equity grows, you can always ask yourself a question in each year. Should I sell? Should I pull out this equity and put it into another asset? And the way you answer that question is return on equity, because if it's if it drops below 10%, then that means if you can earn more than 10%, it's in your interest to pull that equity out and put it into another better performing asset. And that's what I use to kind of tune in my investment horizon. Assuming all other things equal and assuming my assumptions are correct. If I get to a point where my equity is earning only 10%, then I can take that money and roll it over into a better performing investment.
I gotta say, man, you just did an impressive job explaining IRR and return on equity, which are not easy concepts to explain in 3 sentences.
I've had
That's
practice.
impressive, man.
I explained it to my fiance probably about 3 times.
All right, so, and I'm sure you've played around with this, and this is kind of what your current plan is, right? So let's talk about some of the assumptions you plugged in, because a lot of us got the same baseline numbers that we plugged in the previous spreadsheet: purchase price, down payment. I mean, all close enough for just what we're talking about here. But what did you use for like appreciation, your rates, and all this, so we can see how these numbers play out?
Sure. So just as a high level, any of the blue boxed text is stuff that are the assumption. Everything else is computed.
Okay.
So purchase price. I made this model to be flexible enough to run deal analysis on other properties, but for the most part, purchase price, market value, acquisition, and ARV is all the same. My credits there that I got from the financing deal, and then if you scroll down to the bottom, a little bit more, these are my assumptions. And there's quite a bit that we don't need to go into, but basically, if you highlight annual inflation rate, so this is what I'm assuming inflation is going to be year over year, which is what the Fed is targeting, 2.25. So that I'm also inflating my expenses as I'm also increasing rents.
Yep.
And then I also have I'm modeling or making assumption for appreciation above inflation and rent growth above inflation. So at the end of the day, if you go the bottom two, or annual appreciation rate and annual rent growth rate at the bottom is 3% and 3%. So fairly conservative there.
Yeah. So I'm gonna copy this. I'm gonna play around with your spreadsheet if you don't mind. So you were saying that new models are already going for $25,000 appreciation. So best guess for crystal ball, if that's already gone like that in, I don't know, 1 quarter, what do you expect might be 1 year from now for appreciation?
I think like that, like 600,000, like
Okay.
610.
So if it was 610, that would be $50,000 in.
That's almost
appreciation,
10%. Yeah.
which is crazy. So was that oops, where is that spreadsheet?
Gotta find the spreadsheet.
Here we go.
So yeah, if you put in 7.75 would be 10%.
Yeah, that's gonna. So we're gonna leave rent growth above, because I'm gonna bet that you'll see more appreciation growth and more rent growth in next year. It's my crystal ball. So on the model up here, your IRR is now what? That's 60-some%,
Yeah.
70%.
Another note. I also a difference between your model and my model.
Yeah.
I always assume the cash reserves that you have are part of your cash investment, right? Because that's money that is required to hold the property. So I'm including that. Whereas that's why your percentage is 110%. Mine is slightly lower because my basis is a little higher. Little side note, but yeah, just about 65.
Did you build the model to calculate returns on your money on the 1% in the bank? Or
No,
the stock
no.
market 7%.
Now that'll be in the next release.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I mean that obviously changes your returns for IRR, changes your return equity. But if you get higher appreciation like this, does that change your holding period or your strategy? If you do get, say, 10% appreciation, I doubt that's sustainable for a couple of years, but let's just say, that is like that for the next couple of years. What does that do to your strategy?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a numbers guy, so I'm looking at that return on equity. If my return on equity is sufficient, and in here with this assumption, by year 7, it looks like it's around 18%. Or close 20%, I'm probably going to hold it, and unless I can get a better return somewhere else. So ultimately the long-term play is to be able to get a income-producing property that is generating cash flow. And with these assumptions, you're not assuming that the rent is growing, so the green line is still pretty flat. So it's still not cash flowing, but it's a great place to hold my money for sure.
Yeah. All right, so I kind of got a little sidetracked there. So I'm going to put this back to the 0.75, so that way you're at a 3%.
I think you have to do 0.75%. Yeah.
There we go. I unbroke it.
Yep.
All right. What other things you want to talk about on the spreadsheet?
Because
this is like one tab of about 30.
Yeah. I would actually scroll over to the returns tab. It shouldn't have a lock on it. That guy. Yeah, right there. So I actually really like this plot because it kind of is gives you the high level perspective of, where your potential returns are coming from. So here we have every year the total return for appreciation, which is the blue, debt pay down, which is purple, tax savings, which is red, and green is the operational cash flow. So another note is that, I'm not too worried about the operational cash flow because obviously this is, more working with your accountant, but the tax savings can kind of offset that. Mm-hmm. So it's not as big of a deal. But the thing that jumps out at you the most is, hey, it's great to have the green part be positive, but overwhelmingly the largest contribution to your return is the appreciation and debt pay down. So year over year with these assumptions, it's right about $30,000, which is more than what I invested at the front. So that's the way I look at this investment is that make sure it's operating, make sure your cash flow isn't too negative, but and also appreciation. We're in a great market, and I definitely I believe strongly that it's going to continue this way. But people say like that's a cherry on top. Even the debt pay down is still a huge contributor, and that's really decoupled from appreciation. That's like not even an assumption you have to make. It's just going to happen every year.
Yeah. And I mean, after year 1, that's your tenants.
Yeah.
Which makes it a lot sweeter.
Right. So I treat it like a black box as long as, you just have to make sure the cash flow numbers are, tolerable to you. And then, this is the real reason we're investing in real estate.
So now, with this one property in context of like your bigger goals, kind of talk about what's the longer-term goals that you're working towards for real estate?
So for the sake of writing down a goal, I have 15 doors at about $1,000 a month would be about $15,000 of net operating income, and that's assuming obviously all the debt is paid off.
Yeah.
So I'm treating this property as kind of a launching pad towards that. Building my investment capital, be able to 1031 exchange into another property. But yeah, ultimately, I just want enough passive cash flow so that I don't really have to worry too much. I know a lot of people who are getting into the FIRE movement. They want to retire early. I actually love what I do as my career. So I'm not really seeking that retire early goal. But it definitely would be great if I didn't have to rely on a salaried income or anything, and I could just do as I please. So that's the long-term goal, is to just get enough passive income where I could just continue with my career and not have to worry too much.
And so talking about the chess game, so you're gonna nomad and house hack here for the next couple years. How long do you think you can do that before you get tired of it?
Yeah, the goal is 5. First 5 doors would be via house hack, and then from there just do traditional investments. Okay. Because so far it doesn't seem to be that bad, but I know it's going to be exhausting moving every year, and going through the whole rigmarole of finding an investment property where we also want to live, which was another contributing factor to what we ended up deciding on doing, because we were living in Olde Towne Arvada originally, and we really love the area, so we wanted to stay there.
Because it's you and your fiance, right?
Yeah. My fiance, and my dog.
Okay.
Which Isabel the dog has a very big say in where we live, obviously.
Oh yeah, they definitely can have that. I've had dogs my whole life. Know how that goes. All right. Anything else? We got a few minutes before we wrap up. Anything else? Want to talk about the spreadsheet?
There's tons of places we can go with this, but I think we hit the high level points. I mean, there is, there's benefits to be able to model, as much as you think is necessary, but sometimes I feel like I maybe overdid it a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I remember this is I think one of the things maybe you and I talked about, or at least I thought about, is your mom goes, hey, great, because I think a lot of people go through, so you go through like, hey, I got to figure out all these details and run these assumptions. And what I personally noticed when I started, I've built dozens of spreadsheets, I've run hundreds of properties, and I was like, oh, well, after I do all these things, like I kind of have my core assumptions here, and I kind of go more of the simple method.
Yeah.
And just work out. So as you did all this, very impressive modeling, were there like rules of thumb, like, like I can just use this and I'm good enough? Like, what did you learn from just doing extensive modeling and extensive deal analysis? In terms of like balancing detailed modeling versus I can just do some simplistic stuff here.
Yeah, I mean the reason I think I went down the route of complex modeling is that's just kind of my nature. It's kind of what I do. So I enjoy modeling things and getting finding out all of the edge cases and where things could be optimized or where they can go wrong. But I think it's also results from the fact that this is my first investment deal, so I don't really have those quick easy assumptions back of the napkin, because I've never done it before. So it's kind of like that's something that comes with experience. I mean, obviously my next deal I'll be like, all right, well, now I know this market, I know what assumptions I can make, and where's too much analysis. But I definitely think it helped with planning the capital expenditures for a lot of the non-new builds that I was analyzing, because I feel like that is something that's very hand wavy, and I guess it does work. But usually you just say 5%, 8% for reserves, and then. But obviously, if you go to the property, you're like, all right, well, I need to replace the roof in 5 years. I need to replace the water heater in 3, and you can plot out all these expenditures, which I've done in this spreadsheet, and you can see that some things that may look good on paper actually don't necessarily. So if you go to the CapEx tab there, so it's kind of vestigial in this scenario because all of the capital expenditures are beyond my investment horizon. But essentially what I've done here is I've enumerated all of the items, what they cost in $2020 if they were to be replaced today, and then that gets inflated over time. I estimate how much lifespan is remaining and how much, once it's replaced, how long it will last. And given those numbers, it'll be able to plot out all the expenditures over time with inflation, so that if you buy a property that needs a roof replaced in 3 years, you can say, oh look, I'm going to have a huge expense in year 3. Maybe that's a good time to reevaluate my investment and either refinance or sell or do something, because that's also going to be a huge factor in your investment.
Yep, you're exactly right.
So I think that this is the most valuable part of my exercise here in building this model.
And you're absolutely right, because I mean, we often just say 8%. It's like, hey, throw in there while you're modeling. And once you go walk the property, that's where you get more. Hey, we got to replace this. So this water heater, it's got a couple years left, and like that's where you can start calculating more of that stuff. But it's a fine balance of how to calculate it, and also like, who the hell knows? And also maybe a hailstorm comes through, not to replace the roof out of pocket. You pay your insurance deductible, which is always that's everyone's hope out here.
Yeah. But it's also kind of wasteful if you're just throwing a dart at a dartboard for what you're holding for reserves, or what your monthly reserve contribution is, because if you're not using that money, it's just sitting in a bank and it's for an event. But if you know that I'm not going to have to replace anything and I have sufficient PITI reserves, then why am I going to continue to contribute to this account where I can use that in a different investment?
Anthony, this has been great sitting down and the analysis with you. I love learning more about this. But guys, as we wrap this up, I mean, Lauren, any closing thoughts on the deal, or experiences that you can extrapolate and kind of give to listeners and future clients out there? Hey, this happened or this happened, because there's always the curveballs in deals. What are some good takeaways that investors out there can learn from this deal and keep in mind for their first or next deal?
I would definitely say there's a little bit of luck in this one.
Absolutely,
I think the timing of the market, the inventory, really allowed you to be able to source this property. Another kind of final note is, depending upon like where your income goes, maybe your fiance, but you're able to use this grant program multiple times, as long as it's your primary house. And, so maybe you'll be able to use this creative financing for property number 2. And you always got your wife too, or your future wife.
Soon to be wife. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm super excited. We just got settled in. We have our first tenants for Airbnb, and everything seems to be rolling. So I'm ready to do it again as soon as the winter comes around.
Great, Anthony. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate you coming down.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Oh, one last thing. I know this question will be asked. I'm asking it now before people email me. First, I want to know how to contact you. Mm-hmm. And people ask, can I have a copy of the spreadsheet? So how can people contact you? And then tell people, yes or no on the spreadsheet, or what your feeling is on that.
So I they can reach me on my email, which will be posted in the podcast notes. Yep. This is a living document. I keep iterating, so I'll be happy to share a copy in a Google Drive that people can take a look at and play around with for their own analysis.
Awesome.
That's great.
Well, thanks a lot, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, guys. It was awesome.